My memories of the time period leading to the march, and I'll talk about the nuts and bolts, was basically a repressive one, basically a benign kind of a disdain for the power of politics and involvement of African Americans. I remember walking down Woodward Avenue. On the east side of Woodward Avenue, you had a number of African American businesses. But when you went across Woodward on the west side, those were all white businesses. And I remember the place that is now known as the Vietnam Veterans Center was a place called Greenfield's Restaurant. And we as kids would walk down Woodward Avenue, and I would remember pressing my nose up against the place as a kid. And I'd see all these women in these pillbox hats and looking so good, white gloves on and so forth. And they would look at us, and somebody eventually would come outside and run us away because we were not welcome there. It was a time when I felt that the civil rights movement was not just in the South. My friend and I had always said, and he and I marched in the march, that we have more than enough to deal with right here. And as a result of it, then I began to seek out, what the NAACP and other organizations were doing. And then we found out about the march as young people. We spent a lot of time in the public library, many of the other institutions. So we found out about the march and then became involved in not so much the planning, but certainly the participation of it, because there was a desire to have a lot of young people involved in the march. Our teachers over at Garfield and others helped to propel us and prepare us for that march. Seeing the speech, Dr. King was not like, I don't know if, let me put it this way. You see somebody and you think you really know who they are or what they are, but just the profound power of the simplicity of Dr. King and his mission, and the mission that we had was joined. It was a thing that Detroit needed at the time, because Detroit, as many other northern cities, were seen as places where black people were doing very well, and human rights was a major component of what we were doing. But '63 was that kind of pivotal year. It was also the burgeoning of domestic and international battles, warfare, because the war in Vietnam was heating up. And of course, in November 22nd, Kennedy was killed. So as a result of that, the city of Detroit was in movement. And you'll remember that earlier there had been a real push for equal housing opportunity. So the combination of all of these things coming together gives an understanding of how movements develop. All of these things converging because the factors of racism and suppression had forced various people to put together components of mass organizing that they had not done before. Many of these groups had been there through the union movement, but they had not welded a connection with one another. So the Civil Rights March, and the March Down Woodward, built that. And the grassroots movement created a component that later was done in other cities, but at that time was fairly unique to Detroit, because not many people had the time and the resources to actually build a grassroots movement. I think where we are in terms of forward, we obviously have an African-American president, we have other folks, and I think the fact that I'm sitting here and doing this interview goes to the battles that we had to get folks into these kinds of positions in the media. We have to maintain the ones we have, and we have to build others. But we really need independent economic development and community redevelopment and resource development. We need to build that economic base, and we need to do it in a higher tech situation. We need to look at it on a world scale. We don't need to just think about now, it's not just a community, it's the community of the world. And we need to transform who we are. We're not just looking at things only in terms of, I'm black, somebody else is brown, and so forth. We need to have a focus that goes beyond just the fact that we look like each other. I think we need to regain who we are and have a vision of where we want to go that leads us to our heart.